Harry Truman was a plain-spoken man from Independence, Missouri, who served well in the United States Senate. He was a combat infantry officer who distinguished himself with heroism in the First World War. He rose up from county politics and then to Washington and ultimately to the vice presidency. When he swore his oath of office on January 20th, 1945, he was destined to serve one of the shortest vice presidential tenures in American history. On April 12th, 1945, Harry Truman had gone to see his friend, the great Speaker of the House, Sam Rayburn. They were at a card game in Sam Rayburn's hideaway office, and the phone rang. It was a call from the White House. There are competing reports. Did Harry Truman fast walk back to the White House, or was he driven by his single Secret Service agent? Whatever the case may be, when Harry Truman arrived at the White House, he was greeted by Eleanor Roosevelt. She looked at him and said, "Harry, the president is dead." Harry Truman looked back at Eleanor Roosevelt and said, "Mrs. Roosevelt, is there anything I can do for you?" And she responded to him, "No, Mr. President. Is there anything I can do for you?" And Harry Truman said in that moment that he felt like the moon and the stars and all of the heavens had landed on his shoulders. He was a decent man, a good man, who kept a sign on his desk that said, "The buck stops here." He did not evade responsibility, he took it. He presided over a profound transformation in American life. He was truly the first president of the nuclear age, ordering the dropping of 2 atomic weapons to end the war in Asia against the Japanese Empire. Harry Truman desegregated the military, and Harry Truman fundamentally reorganized the government and created the structures that we recognize today. World War II had transformed the United States. Before the war, the United States had the 38th largest military in the world. After the war, its preeminence has never been challenged since. The organization of government created something larger, bigger than any generation of Americans had ever conceived. And the first president who managed that organization, created and architected by FDR and Harry Truman, was a Republican, Dwight Eisenhower. The supreme Allied commander of Allied expeditionary forces in Europe was singularly prepared to manage the complexity of this evolving, growing behemoth that today stands $32 trillion in debt. But back then, Dwight Eisenhower, a solid manager, a great leader, had the reins over the federal government. When he left office, before generational change occurred, the 69-year-old Eisenhower gave a warning to the country as the 43-year-old John Kennedy, the president-elect, waited to take the oath of office just days later. What Dwight Eisenhower warned about was the military-industrial complex. He pointed out that the United States had never had a permanent armaments industry. Eisenhower said, "Our people could turn plowshares into swords when necessary. Our factories could make tanks when necessary. But the moment now required a permanence, an industrial capacity to constantly make the weapons, to innovate the weaponry and the technology necessary to keep the country safe." But he warned that a great complex of making weapons could strangle the ability of a country to invest in its future, that we could lose sight of the purpose of the Great Republic. Now, Eisenhower's vision has certainly come to pass. Isn't it time you opt out of restrictive health insurance plans and let Crowd Health help fit your healthcare needs? Get started today. for just $50 per month. Use code WARNING to get the healthcare you deserve. Crowd Health is not insurance. Learn more at joincrowdhealth.com. That's joincrowdhealth.com. Code WARNING. The Pentagon is so big that it can't pass an audit. And that's a threat to American national security. But there's also another threat to American national security. It's the political industrial complex. It deceives the American people and it lies to them. Here are two examples. Every single Republican at one time, all of them off camera, and many through this very hour, will be the first to tell you with a sympathetic hand on your shoulder and a sincere look in the eye that Donald Trump is crazy and a threat. But as soon as that camera light goes on, they are locked in behind him 100%. The Democrats are doing it now too. Until 3 weeks ago, no one would say the quiet part out loud. Nobody. They wouldn't say the truth, that Joe Biden, a good man, a man who's been a good president, is losing the election to an evil man who will become a dictator and wreck the country. This is a moment of national catastrophe. And there is another component of the political industrial complex. There is the Grifter Class, people like the Lincoln Project, where every dollar that a little old lady gives those grifters, 93 cents goes in their pockets and 7 cents is sprinkled somewhere else. Groups like the Lincoln Project, such as it is and exists today, more than anything else want Donald Trump to be the nominee because it's their business. If Donald Trump goes away, they go away. Is that hard to understand? The purpose of American politics is to make America better, and democracy cannot be protected unless it's occasionally practiced. Now, back to the industrial complexes, whether they be military, whether they be political, whether the motivation be for the shareholder or for the grifter to pocket the money. The result is the same. It's all bad for America.